Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Hello and welcome to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil, your married couple combo. That's what we are. Now, as the war in Israel and Gaza intensifies and people in Britain take to the street to protest, we'll be speaking to a former Met police officer to say, what will the police be doing? What does it take for a police officer to arrest somebody shouting jihad, waving a Hamas flag? We want to know.
And the Sentencing Council are reportedly looking at whether or not to make a greater presumption against sending pregnant women to prison who commit an offence. We'll be having a debate. Should pregnant women not be spared jail, or is that just a get out of jail free card and everyone should be treated the same? We'll be having that as our big debate.
And Keir Starmer, well, he's had a bit of a bad week, hasn't he? He's got his front bench and regional mayors calling for a ceasefire. What is he going to do? I personally think these are direct challenges to his leadership of the Labour Party.
And we'll be going through the papers today with our superstar guests, Mike Parry and Frank McKenna. And just for your treat, it's a Saturday morning, I have found another couple of sex stories in the Sun. You don't want to miss those. And of course, we want to know what you think about all of these stories and much more. So please join in the conversation. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.com.
Particularly your sex stories. I'm saying that about an MP. It might come out wrong, mightn't it? I mean, your stories from the paper on that matter.
Well, take it how you want to. Anyway, before we get stuck into all of those stories, here are the news headlines with everyone's favourite, Tatiana Sanchez.
Phil, thank you very much and good morning. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom.
Hamas says it'll confront Israeli attacks with full force after air and ground offensives on Gaza intensified overnight. The enclave is facing a near-total communications blackout, with internet and mobile phone services cut off. The World Health Organization says it's lost contact with all its staff working in Gaza. Israel's military is expanding its ground operations, raising the question of whether an anticipated invasion of Gaza may be imminent. Well, large crowds are expected in London and other cities this afternoon as people gather to demand a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. Around 100,000 people are expected in the capital, with other rallies taking place elsewhere, including Manchester, Glasgow and Birmingham. The Metropolitan Police are advising caution and say officers will intervene if protesters are deemed to be supporting terrorism. Meanwhile, the United Nations has overwhelmingly adopted a resolution calling for a humanitarian truce in Gaza. The resolution, drafted by Arab states, condemns all violence, terror and indiscriminate attacks against Palestinian and Israeli civilians. It's also demanding aid access to the besieged Gaza Strip. The resolution is not binding, but could put diplomatic pressure on Israel to de-escalate the conflict. The UK's Foreign Secretary James Cleverly also reiterated the government's continuing calls for humanitarian aid.
We have been focused throughout on ensuring the safety, where possible, of the British hostages and the British nationals in Gaza. We've also been speaking to try and secure their release, but also to have the humanitarian aid get into Gaza. We will continue to pursue those aims, and the conversations that I've had with the Israeli government, we have reiterated our support for their right to defend themselves, but also that they do so in accordance with international law.
The search for a man suspected of carrying out a mass shooting in the US state of Maine has ended after a man was found dead. Army reservist Robert Card is believed to have killed 18 people and wounded another 13 in a shooting rampage. His body was discovered with self-inflicted gunshot wounds in a woodland area near the town of Lisbon Falls. The shooting began at a bowling alley earlier this week and was followed by reports of another shooting at a nearby restaurant. It's the deadliest mass shooting in the state's history. Now, there's no relief in sight to a record backlog of Crown Court trials, according to the Director of Public Prosecutions. Max Hill KC, who's stepping down this month, says a shortage of barristers and judges is clogging up the system. He says cases are at an all-time high, and while the judiciary has been expanded slightly, it's not been enough to alleviate the pressure. Latest figures show more than 65,000 cases are still awaiting trial. A proposal to close rail ticket offices has resulted in the biggest ever response to a public consultation. The RMT union says around 750,000 passengers have had their say ahead of an expected announcement on the future of ticket offices at train stations. The union's head, Mick Lynch, is warning the government against the closures, saying that 98% of respondents are opposed to the controversial plan. Around £7 million of taxpayers' money has been spent on renovations at the Speaker's house. Since Lindsay Hoyle took office in 2019, more than £1 million a year has been spent on the property, including on staterooms and offices. The figures, which were revealed in a Freedom of Information request, don't say how much was spent on furnishings compared to structural improvements. However, the Telegraph understands that some of the money has been spent on silverware. And it's looking to be dark and gloomy this Halloween weekend, with weather warnings in place for parts of England and Scotland. A yellow warning covers Brighton, Portsmouth, Canterbury and London, with the possibility of heavy rain. The Met Office says there's a small chance of power cuts as well as flooding and public transport delays. A yellow warning remains in place in Scotland as well, with some rail services still suspended following damage caused by Storm Babbitt. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio, and now on your smart speaker by simply saying play GB News. Now it's back to Esther and Philip.
Thanks, Tatiana. Thousands of pro-Palestine protesters will take to the streets of Britain today as calls for a ceasefire intensify.
New statistics show a shocking 408 anti-Semitic attacks in the latest week alone, along with 174 Islamophobic attacks.
The march comes following harsh criticism of the Metropolitan Police's handling of the last Palestine Solidarity March, with shouts of jihad being caught on camera with seemingly no repercussions from authorities.
So what do the police need to do to ensure the safety of all communities and avoid a repeat of previous shortcomings? Well, joining us now is the former Deputy Assistant Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, Stephen Roberts. Stephen, thank you for joining us. I don't know what you make of the policing of previous protests that we've seen on the streets. You know, Esther mentioned about people shouting for a jihad, people carrying maybe Hamas flags or signs saying I support Hamas, or people chanting from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. How should the police deal with all of those things at these protests?
The police should very steadfastly remember what the law is, what the law does and what the law doesn't permit. And in public order situations like this, particularly where there's very, very strong feelings on both sides, the police service has to be very careful that it only enforces the law as it is. And on these particular occasions, the Commissioner has been very wise in having Crown prosecution lawyers available over the radio to give live, real-time advice to the operational officers on the ground. And the advice that they were giving was that offences hadn't actually been committed. They're quite technical offences and require proof of intent as well as proof of what the individual may actually be doing. But there's a second issue as well in public order policing, and that is, even if an offence is being committed, is it actually sensible and wise for police officers to plough into a big demonstration like we've seen to try and make arrests, and thereby perhaps cause far more disorder than exists, particularly if it's legally questionable whether or not people are committing offences.
So on that, Stephen, I mean, I do understand the point that you're making there, that in effect you might turn a blind eye to a crime being committed because you fear that the situation will get worse if the police do. We saw recently two people in the vicinity of one of these protests carrying a Union Jack flag and being warned by a police officer that they may well be arrested. Surely people shouldn't be arrested just for carrying a Union Jack flag in their own country, should they?
No, they shouldn't, in principle. It does always depend on circumstances. It does always depend not only on what they're doing, but what they're saying. And sometimes, believe it or not, young police officers will make a mistake. And I think we've got to accept that. And we have to accept that that's why they need more experienced officers supervising them and lawyers in the background giving them proper sound legal advice. Don't forget, after these events have all finished, they will be trawled over by lawyers who will have the luxury of time, of peace, of quiet, for it to be decided whether or not each individual officer has acted properly or improperly.
Stephen, can I ask a question? Because following up on what you said there about, oh, you've got to be careful that you don't want to inflame a situation so the police might not intervene. Doesn't that lead to mob rule in a way? You're frightened that people on the streets might have even worse behaviour intervene. So what's the difference between mob rule there? Get more people out disobeying the law and the police won't do anything.
No, it's not a matter of mob rule. And the mere fact that arrests might not be made at the time doesn't mean that they won't be made later. Quite often, the sensible thing to do is to record what's happened, record the evidence, identify the people involved, and go and visit them later and deal with it. But
Stephen Roberts, you've reassured me there that the police would be doing that. So thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning, Stephen Roberts. That did actually make me feel better that they would video it and go back to them afterwards. Now, to look through the top stories of the day, we're delighted to be joined by TV and radio presenter Mike Parry and the CEO of Downtown in Business, Frank McKenna. So we'll start with you, Mike. What have you seen in the papers today?
Well, there's a story that's making my blood boil, Esther, and I'm trying to be recruited as an eco-warrior, but I don't even know I am being being recruited. Guess what now? There's an organisation called Carbon Friendly Dining, and they're asking that another surcharge be put on your bill when you're in a restaurant. And we already get, like, tipped twice, don't we? You know, the wine is extra expensive, but when the bill comes, 15% service charge. You won't believe it. The Carbon Friendly Dining want an extra bit put on your bill to pay for counterbalancing the environmental impact of providing that food and putting it on your plate. What?
So
has the world gone completely bonkers?
So is it already on the bill and you've got to ask for it to be removed, or do they ask you, can we put this on your bill?
This is why I'm telling you they're trying to recruit me as an eco-warrior. It says here, oh, don't worry, diners can ask for it to be removed. You don't look at your bill to that extent, and you know you come out afterwards, and then later on that night you're thinking, that was a bit expensive. Oh, I've just contributed to being an eco-warrior. I don't want to be an eco-warrior. I've got my own thoughts on how to save the planet. It does not include having to pay a tax to the lorry driver who bought my cabbage from the field to the plate.
Well, I can tell you, it does actually make my blood boil, this extra charity stuff. So if you go into any kind of supermarket now, it's already on the tab. And I think, well, hang on, they've chosen the charity. They're telling what to... I think, but that's not right. That's none of your business. I've come in here for...
But you can't even take that off, can you?
Well, no, I think you can.
Well, when
obviously, I've tried, you haven't.
No, but what I'm saying is, if you're paying automatically instead of to a human being, how do you take it off?
You press a button, do not add
Do you?
on. Well, look, I wonder what viewers think about that, because I do think that's overstretching.
I think it's outrageous.
Well, you know, I mean, what do you think? I mean, you represent lots of business organisations, Frank. It does, to be honest, I go into McDonald's occasionally. I don't tell Esther I go into McDonald's. But
no, he's only ever having a salad.
Yeah, obviously for the salads, exactly. And they put a thing at the end and it says, you know, will you round this up to whatever to go to the local charity and whatever? Fine. Well, the thing is, the thing that really gets my goat is that at the end of the year, this business will go and say, we've handed over X million pounds to this charity. I haven't handed over a penny. It's all the customers.
We've raised this.
That's got Phil riled, that one.
What do you think about this?
Yeah, mixed views, really, because we do work with lots of businesses, but we work with lots of charities as well. And certainly post-pandemic, charities have faced...
But this ain't a charity, Frank, if you don't mind me saying. No, you know what I mean?
Your issue is slightly different to the one that Esther and Phil are referring to. But I always do look, actually, at Tesco, because I'm a regular shopper there. Terry Leahy's fault. Another Scouser.
Sir Terence Leahy, if you don't mind.
Terry. So I always look at the charity, and it's usually something fairly mainstream, like NSPCC or something. I agree with you, Phil. I don't think they should be taking credit at the end of the year for the amount of cash they've raised. But if it was a charity I didn't particularly support, I would happily just press no. In terms of the point that Mike raises, again, I think that we've got to be careful in terms of the hospitality sector, in terms of simply continuing to add things to bills, because it's an expensive thing to do anyway.
I was going to say
out of a night, so it's difficult.
But even getting your shopping cost of living, this, that, the other. And it is a form, if you feel embarrassed, I can't afford it, but do you know what? I'll leave it on, or should I take it off? There's an embarrassment there. You are being forced to do it, and I don't like that.
Absolutely. And Frank, isn't it anti-business anyway if they're starting to dictate to you the terms of the business that you are paying for? You know what I mean? It says here, it originated in California. It doesn't surprise me. A few years ago, I think people in California are all a bit loony. And a few years ago, I was in a restaurant in Santa Monica, and we ordered a bottle, as you would if you come from this country, to have a bottle while we were looking at the menus. When he came to order the food, we said, can we have another bottle, please? What? And I'm not joking, he went off and brought back a card saying, do you know the dangers of overconsumption of alcohol? Instead of serving us another bottle of wine.
Well, he's just being health conscious. But I think in terms of the hospitality sector in the round, I think they will have to be careful about this sort of stuff. And I'm sure most restaurants actually would say, we're not going to do that.
The ones who seem to be the Marco Pierre White and the James Martin. Those are the ones some of them signed up. Go on, Phil.
Yeah, too expensive for me anyway. So.
So, obviously, what do you make... Boris Johnson joining the GB News channel was the big announcement yesterday. We're claiming credit.
I'll tell you what, we were the first two on this station to interview him, and as we were chatting, I know he was slightly envious and he wanted to be on this channel. We opened the doors there. We got some, I think, pictures. It was back in April 2022 there.
21, when he was Prime Minister.
21, apologies, 2021.
Here we are.
Oh, look at that. look how that was. That was actually in the Thatcher room, wasn't it?
It was in
number
the Thatcher
10.
room in number
There's
10.
a smile in there.
Yeah.
Him saying, can I get a job on GB News? I said, hold fire. Hold fire, we'll do it when the time's right. So what do you think there, Frank?
That wasn't at one of the parties, was it?
No, that was way before.
No.
Way after.
Listen, you know my views on Boris Johnson. I've expressed them on this programme before. I think he'd be better suited to an entertainment programme than he was to politics and running the country. But I do think, you know, on a serious note, there will be an awful lot of people who are upset at the fact that, you know, we're going through this COVID inquiry, which we may talk about in a moment. The results and recommendations of which we don't know about yet. I think there's an awful lot more to come out. And I think that there is an underestimate of the number of people out there who are very, very upset at some of the... And I'm only talking about COVID, actually. Some of the other things that he did in government, vaccinations, Ukraine, people very supportive of. But I think, given the fact that we're in the middle of the inquiry...
So is that a yes or no? You don't think he should be on the station? I don't think BBC would be wanting to have news for you.
I think he'll get great...
Listen,
he's Marmite, isn't he? So, and I appreciate that, because I am with some people. But I do think there are going to be an awful lot of people out there who will be critical and upset at GB News bringing him onto the...
But they'll still watch him. My view in life is that you take the opportunity when it's there. He's not always going to be this famous. He's not always going to be so, you know, mesmerising to the general public because of his recent career as Prime Minister. So you cash in on what you've got. Everybody should do that. I certainly have. That's why I'm here.
I'm not blaming Boris, but I think, again, it goes back to the point you were making about business.
Yes.
So does the channel take the view, well, he's going to be box office for a short period of time?
Of course they should.
Or does it look at the longer-term legacy that it may leave behind?
All I will say, he's a terrific journalist. He was at the Telegraph there. He's on the Mail now, Spectator. So people do appreciate he has got a big world view, and that's what he's here for, his views on things, because we believe in freedom.
But he's also very, very popular. We know he's very popular. He got an 80-seat majority. You know, he was mayor of London twice. They don't vote for Tories in London. So on that basis, if that gets transferred into people switching on to GB News, it's a good business
anyway,
decision.
I'm only saying we introduced him. That's all I'm saying. And he said to me, can I get a job at GB News? I said, let me see what I can do.
You sorted it for us.
Well, I did promise at the start of the show that I've got a couple of sex stories. So I'm going to do one this hour, one next hour. This is the first one.
Tory MP with a sex story.
And it actually links into what you were saying about California. They might have been looking after your interests, Mike, actually. It says here, page 26 of The Sun, boozing makes men flop in bed. Experts have confirmed that what boozy lovers have always feared, drinking too much can turn men into total flops in bed, and it gets worse the more they indulge. Apparently, it reduces sexual pleasure, desire and arousal, increases the risk of erectile dysfunction, a study has found. What do you think to that, Mike?
Why did you need a study? I knew that when I was 17, right? Why? Who was...
Were you in the study?
I was in the study, yeah. So how have they come to this conclusion? It says it's an exclusive story, which might mean it might only be one person who's involved in this, right? But what did they do? Get some bloke to get completely bladderated and then introduce him to a young lady. Oh, nothing happened.
They did a survey of 78 heavy drinkers, aged 28 to 50.
78? What a survey of 78 people?
Would you have put your name down for that trial?
I'm very doubtful, but as Mike said, did we not know this already? They haven't paid a lot of money for this particular research.
Well, look, that's it for the time being. We've left you all on a high there. You all on a high.
Unless you're drinking.
Or a low.
We want to hear your views. You'll be back with us in an hour's time, giving us more of the top stories of the day.
Lovely. Well, coming up, it's been a tough week for Sir Keir Starmer following backlash from Labour members across the country over his stance on the Israel-Hamas conflict. But can the Labour leader heal those tensions in his party? Is he doing the right thing?
And should pregnant women be spared jail? The Sentencing Council is assessing whether there should be a presumption against sending female convicts to prison. We'll have a fiery debate on just that. Back in a moment.
Who is it?
We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil. The time now is 10:24. So Sir Keir Starmer has faced significant backlash from many of his party members over his response to the Israel-Hamas conflict.
150 Labour Muslim councillors have signed a letter to the party leader urging him to call for an immediate ceasefire after he faced huge internal criticism after declaring Israel does have a right to withhold water and power from Gaza in retaliation for the invasion, despite later issuing a clarification that he only said Israel has a right to self-defence.
Positions on the Israel-Palestine dispute have been a long-standing cause of contention within the Labour Party. But how should Sir Keir Starmer deal with the growing calls for a ceasefire in his own ranks?
Well, with us to discuss this, a chief political commentator at The Independent, John Rentoul, and Imam Ajmal Masroor. Ajmal, if we can start with you first. Thank you both for joining us. How annoyed is the Muslim community about the stance that Keir Starmer has taken? And what is it about his stance that has infuriated people so much?
Thank you very much for inviting me. It is not just the Muslim community. I think people across the board, especially those who have been very supportive of Labour Party, have been incensed by Keir Starmer's position. He claims to be a human rights lawyer. He claims to lead a party that is supposed to stand for universal rights and justice and human rights and human value. And yet he did not have enough compassion or humanity within him to actually say that while Israel has the right to defend itself, Palestinians have the right to live without occupation, without being brutalized, without being bombed to smithereens, without their babies being bombed to bits. He did not have the courage within himself to stand up and say, Israel, stop. Even now, he hasn't called for a ceasefire. It's cowardly, it's outrageous, and for him to think that he's going to be able to get Muslim votes in the next election, he needs to think again. He's not going to get the Muslim votes that he did before. In fact, it's not only Keir Starmer. Rishi Sunak should also be ashamed of himself, because he thinks by standing with Israel and not saying anything for the Palestinians, especially the innocent, he's doing the right thing. In fact, he's doing the most immoral thing ever, and that is siding one and ignoring the other. The current crisis is a conflict between two people, and we need to stand objectively and say, to end this awful fight between the two people, sit down and sort it out, guys, instead of siding one and ignoring the other. And Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak are both to be blamed for what's going on in Palestine, especially 4,000 children who have been killed.
Ajmal, when last week, obviously, Sir Keir Starmer did get himself into a pickle. He went to a mosque up in Cardiff there. We were seeing some pictures from it. Did you feel you were being used in a way? Did you know what that visit was for, to give him cover for what he'd said?
You know, when Tony Blair invited us to his office, Downing Street, after having bombed Iraq and illegally invading it, I remember when he put his hand out to shake my hand, I said, I don't shake hands with people who are war criminals, those who invade and illegally attack other people. Keir Starmer, after supporting Israel to carpet bomb Palestine and kill so many innocent people, it is outrageous that he did not stand up and say, yes, there needs to be a right to defend yourself, but right to defend yourself comes with law and is governed by international law. I'm surprised he was allowed in a mosque. I would go one step further, and I'll say to all people, anywhere you are, any leader, political leader, or a faith leader who's supporting the massacre of Palestinians and staying silent about the human rights abuse and carpet bombing and almost genocide that is being perpetrated by Israelis on the Palestinians, you should boycott them, ban them from coming to your centers of places of worship and communities, and tell them you'll be voting with your feet in the next election. Look at these images that you're showing. How many babies do we need to see killed before our leaders wake up?
Ajmal, I mean, obviously, they're your opinions. I'm pretty sure Keir Starmer would deny that he's in favour of carpet bombing Gaza from Israel, and I'm pretty sure Israel would deny that they're committing genocide. But you're giving your opinion, and that's fine. But I think we ought to just make that clear for balance. John, if I can bring you in here. I mean, how much of a problem is this for Keir Starmer that these sort of growing calls on the backbenchers and amongst councillors and some resignations amongst councillors and the calls for a ceasefire? As Ajmal said, Keir Starmer's pretty much supported the government's line so far on the conflict. How difficult is this going to get for him?
Well, I would take issue with Ajmal in his suggestion that that's one-sided. I mean, I think he failed to condemn the massacre of civilians by Hamas in what he said just then. So there are different views, and I don't think his view is particularly representative of the view in the Labour Party that causes Keir Starmer a problem. I mean, I think Keir Starmer does have a problem, but it is a problem with the mainstream of the Labour Party. I think what was really striking this week was Jess Phillips, who's a shadow minister. She stood up and expressed her unhappiness with Rishi Sunak's line, and by implication, therefore, with Keir Starmer's line. And this call for a ceasefire has become the sort of rallying point for a lot of people in the Labour Party.
John, you're right, because it seems to me you've got Andy Burnham coming out, you've got Sadiq Khan coming out, both of whom fancy themselves as a future leader of the Labour Party. So I definitely say there were challenges there afoot already to be leader there of the Labour Party. But then you've got people like David Blunkett coming out saying, oh, look, you're all just saying this to make yourself feel better. He's telling the Labour Party, those people coming out there, to grow up. Strong words from David Blunkett.
Absolutely, and I do think actually David Blunkett represents the centre of the Labour Party more than others, more than Andy Burnham and Anas Sarwar, for example, as well. I mean, I think they're adopting a position for the sake of their constituencies. If they were in Keir Starmer's position, I think they would adopt the same position as he has done. which I think is the only sensible position for the Labour Party to take.
But John, what should Keir Starmer do when he has shadow ministers, Rushanara Ali, Imran Hussain, my next door neighbour in Bradford? They've both shadow ministers who have signed an EDM calling for a ceasefire. They've tweeted out that there should be a ceasefire. They've called for a ceasefire against, it seems, Keir Starmer's policy. How should he deal with shadow ministers who are going against the leader's policy? Should he sack them?
No, I think he should say this is a matter of semantics, because he's after all calling for a humanitarian pause, which is the US government's position. So this is really a question of words and definitions. A ceasefire on its own seems to me personally to be a curious response to the Hamas terrorist atrocity where they attacked civilians indiscriminately. And to suggest a ceasefire in that context seems to me extremely one-sided, suggesting that Israel shouldn't be allowed to defend itself. So I'm opposed to the use of that word, but I think it is very similar to a humanitarian pause, and I think the Labour Party can unite around that. And I think sacking people is probably only going to make matters worse.
Ajmal, I want to come back to the UK and the protests that are happening on the street, but not just that, the rise in anti-Semitism, huge, 1,400% in the last year, also a rise in Islamophobia. So what are religious leaders, your religious leaders, going to do to say we need to calm the tensions on the ground in Great Britain? We are GB News, and I want to know that.
Fantastic. Thank you for asking that question. Firstly, John, I have very categorically, in many of my Friday sermons in my mosques, as well as on GB News itself, categorically condemned what Hamas did to the Israelis. So you probably didn't hear that particular interview. But nevertheless, it's important for us to be consistent. We are condemning both sides. What we are seeing from Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak and many others is they're just condemning one side, forgetting the plight of the Palestinians who have suffered for 75 years of occupation, illegal settlement, dehumanization. That must end, and we all need peace in that region. Secondly, from my mosque and all faith leaders, we must be genuine about it. We should invite our congregation and people around in our communities saying, look, we all stand for fairness and justice for all people. All life matters. No one should be living under occupation. No one should be living under the threats of terror attack. No one should be living under bombs. We should be creating a peaceful world. Ultimately, that's what religion teaches. And by the way, Judaism and Islam are so similar in their principles and their values. It's unbelievable. When I was a younger lad, I was writing a book
specifically on the point, are you going to be saying, if people are protesting, stop it and stop the attacks, stop the anti-Semitism to your congregation, to your friends?
I'm going to invite people to go and protest, because unless we protest, this is our democratic right. Nobody would know the opposite view. Secondly, I'll be telling our congregation, Muslim congregation in my mosque, that we need to stand together and unite and fight against injustice in all shapes and sizes. So we want to create a peaceful state where Jews, Christians and Muslims live side by side as equal citizens with respect and dignity. We want to end the occupation in the Holy Land.
Ajmal Masroor, thank you very much indeed. I don't think quite I got that definitive stopping the protest there. And John Runtoul, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning.
Well, I think he was quite right. He said that people have got a democratic right to protest.
We want to stop the attacks, though, on the anti-Semitism and the Islamophobia.
But there's a difference between protesting. There's a difference between going out on a protest and then going out on some anti-Semitic mission.
So one could bubble into. So what I'm saying is, but are you going to stop that? When you speak to your congregation, it's all right to protest, but absolutely no attacks on people.
Well, I mean, look, there's clearly been an unacceptable rise in anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. But both of them are outrageous. And
but I was just waiting for him to say, I'm going to tell my congregation, no attack, no nothing. We don't want to do this. Not in this country. Not in this country.
No, but I think he was right to say they could protest.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll have a row in the break. Coming up next, the Sentencing Council is examining whether pregnant women convicted of crimes could be spared being sent to jail. Or should they? Stick around to hear a debate on this.
And a new biography on George Harrison came out this week. We're joined by the author, Philip Norman, to discuss the life of the Quiet Beatle, especially with the last of the Beatles songs coming out next week.
in a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil. The time now is 10:40. Some of your views are coming in here. David says, it's great news to hear that the articulate voice of Boris will be able to speak to us in his own manner. Fantastic news.
We were just discussing about Labour councillors writing to Keir Starmer about the policy on a ceasefire. Mike from Forest of Dean says, why don't these councillors get on with their own local problems and leave the international problems to the United Nations?
And Kathy says the government should stop these protests across the country, just like France has. This is disrupting ordinary people going about their business.
Keep those views coming in.
Now, the Sentencing Council is currently assessing whether pregnant women convicted of crimes should be spared jail.
Many have argued that the prison environment is detrimental to unborn babies and that an innocent child should not have to face repercussions for their mother's actions, whereas others believe that implementing exemptions would incentivise female criminals to get pregnant to evade justice.
To debate this, we're joined by author and journalist Emma Wolfe and the Deputy Leader of UKIP, Rebecca Jane. Starting with you, Emma, shouldn't everybody be equal before the law?
In theory, yes, but I think in this situation, we have to be very clear that a prison is no place for a pregnancy. It really isn't. And perhaps I'm thinking more of the unborn baby than I am of the mother. And perhaps there will be unintended consequences. But I think we need to be very, very clear that unless it's a terribly, terribly violent, dangerous crime, I think most female offenders should be able to carry out some form of custodial sentence or, within the community, within their home, perhaps tagged during their pregnancy and in the early months of their baby's life. I think we need to be really clear. Prisons are not a safe environment. They're not a nurturing environment, and they're not a healthy environment for a pregnant woman, and more importantly, for her unborn child. They're not comfortable in terms of sleeping and, when you get bigger, when you're pregnant. They're not even the basic midwife checks, Esther, things like blood pressure, just basic antenatal tests are not routinely carried out. And there have been deaths. There was a recent tragic death of a baby. A woman went into labor alone, locked in her cell, and it became an emergency. A straightforward, healthy pregnancy, which most pregnancies are, can become and does become a high-risk event when you are behind bars.
But Emma, won't this just make criminal families get somebody, a pregnant female in their family, to go out and commit some of their crimes because they know that, well, it's all right, because even if she gets caught, she's not going to go to prison, and it'll just give women a get-out-of-jail card before sentencing. If they're convicted of a fairly serious offence and they're bailed for sentencing, they just get themselves pregnant before they come back to court for sentencing, and they've got a get-out-of-jail-free card. That can't be right, surely.
It can't be right, and it reminds me a little bit of that old thing they used to say in the 80s and 90s about, women just getting pregnant to get a council house, to get a bigger council house. Look, getting pregnant, having a baby is quite a big deal. Many women don't just do it at the drop of a hat. You are right. There are going to be female offenders, or people who are accused, who know that their court date is coming up in a couple of months and will get pregnant, because if that is a get-out-of-jail card, they will use it. Those are the unintended consequences. But let's think about the majority. Let's think about female prisoners who are behind bars. I repeat, that is not a safe place or a nurturing place for a baby.
Let's bring Rebecca in. Rebecca, I don't know if you've been persuaded by anything that Emma said there. I mean, up to 100 children a year are born in prison. Those babies haven't committed any crime. They shouldn't be punished, should they, and imprisoned because of the actions of their mother?
Unfortunately, no, I agree with a lot of what Emma says on a lot of occasions, but on this one, I'm not there. There cannot be any reason for me why we should stop imprisoning women just because they get pregnant. I truly do believe that there will be a rise if we have this blanket law, and I think a blanket law would be very dangerous. Emma obviously is talking a lot about the mitigating circumstances. Well, in criminal law, obviously, before somebody is sentenced, there is a lot of mitigation arguments, and these things are taken into account already. So if somebody is then still imprisoned and they are pregnant or they have children, it is already considered. There are not great volumes of people who are having pregnancies in jail. When I looked into it, it's between about 30 to 60 women a year who are doing that. If they are imprisoned, there's a very good reason for it. And to do anything other than that would be, like I say, I think it'd be a dangerous precedent to be setting.
Rebecca, some people will say a pregnancy, having a child, could be the start of a new beginning, both for the child and for the mother. Do you think the criminal system could facilitate that new beginning for the both of them in a better way rather than being in prison?
I think it could facilitate it being better for them, but I don't think that to have a blanket policy of let's not put anybody in prison who is pregnant is not the answer. I do think that there are errors in the system, actually. And obviously, like I say, when I was doing my research, it was actually quite disturbing that a mother can potentially only spend up to 6 weeks not basically having a job in jail, which I think is actually really awful, because as somebody that almost died during pregnancy, I know that it took me a good 6 months to recover from that. So I think that that's a concern. I also thought what was something quite concerning is that if you do have your child in prison with you, the maximum age that they can leave you is 18 months. I think that needs a little bit of extension. But the mother has to pay for the food when she's in prison, whereas the prison obviously provided it for her. I don't think that that's a very supportive system to have in place for a child being in prison. I think there are a lot of things that could be done better to look after mother and baby when they are in the prison system, because there's a very good reason why they're there.
Emma, I just wanted to say, I mean, my great-grandma was a suffragette. Feminists fought for equality for years and years and years. Isn't it the case now that we've got a sort of a new form of feminism which sort of wants equality when it suits, but wants special treatment when it doesn't suit?
Well, yes, but this is a special case. And Phil, I'm so glad you bring up your great-grandmother. I was going to bring up, for your literary viewers, I was going to bring up Moll Flanders by Daniel Defoe, which is a fabulous book and is all about female criminals, you know, sort of criminals in the old city of London getting pregnant, literally getting pregnant to avoid jail. So I recommend everybody to read Moll Flanders. But I think, look, we know our prison system is broken. Until it is better, unfortunately, it needs to be better. It needs to be the place to make that fresh start. A pregnancy is a new beginning. It's a new baby. It's a new life. If only this could be the beginning. But unfortunately, with the prison system we have now, which is not only groaning at the seams, but is broken, is Victorian, is unsanitary, is unsafe, I'm afraid that is not the place for a fetus to be developing and to be brought into this world.
Emma, Rebecca, thank you both for that debate. I bet your viewers have got lots
Yes,
of
let us
views
know what
about
you think about this. I've got to say, I'm with Rebecca. I mean, I don't think you can have people with like a, oh, you know, get out of jail free. I got myself pregnant to avoid jail.
Well, you know, an extra thing, so there are baby and mother units in prison. In 2020, the government launched an initiative to make it a better place with a resident mother and baby specialist in those prisons. But equally, isn't that also a deterrent for women not to commit crimes if they're wanting to have a family? Surely there's a saying, do you know what, it isn't the place for me, it certainly isn't the place for my baby, therefore I won't commit a crime.
There's got to be
maybe
some individual responsibility.
process.
I mean, yeah, I think, you know, maybe they should think about this before they commit the crime in the first place.
And would it be, I'm just putting it out there, we're all saying the baby shouldn't be in prison with the mum, so does that mean you should separate the mum from the baby, that the mother stays in prison serving a sentence, the child... That's a different thing. But what I meant is there's so many different dynamics and dimensions to this.
Tell us what you think. gbviews@gbnews.com. I'm sure you've got lots of strong opinions about that.
Well, George Harrison, known by adoring fans as the Quiet Beatle, has always been the most enigmatic member of the iconic rock band.
George largely stayed in the background of Beatlemania, despite leading on some of the band's most loved tracks, including Here Comes the Sun, one of my favourites, and enjoying a solo career, producing the highest-selling Beatles solo album, All Things Must Pass, in 1971.
Renowned rock biographer Philip Norman has recently documented George's life story in a new book titled George Harrison, The Reluctant Beatle, and he joins us now. So explain why he was a reluctant Beatle. I bet you everybody in the world would have wanted to have been a Beatle. Why was he reluctant?
He wasn't a reluctant musician, but he absolutely hated the fact that in the Beatlemania years, the constant screaming that went on. Nobody could hear his very painstakingly crafted guitar solos that were very important to every Beatles song. Also, he was always discriminated against because, within the Beatles, because John Lennon and Paul McCartney were such brilliant songwriters and George was really kept in the background. So it looked a wonderful life, but on the inside it was really full of sort of being overlooked and sidelined and sometimes quite badly insulted.
Now, he was always the spiritual one, at least we consider him as that, but did he also, therefore, because of that spirituality, dislike being public property?
He disliked being public property even when he was a small boy at primary school. He didn't like his mother gossiping with the other mothers because she might be talking about him. He was a very private person, which was not a thing to be if you're in the Beatles, of course. But also, he was, half of him was mystical and spiritual, and half was very sort of worldly. And he would flick from one to the other very quickly. You know, he would. 1 minute he would want to be taking cocaine, and another minute he would be wanting to spin his prayer wheel and chant and do mantras.
Philip, I mean, I suppose one of the things that he's famous for on a negative side, I suppose, is the fact that he was found guilty of plagiarism with his song "My Sweet Lord" in 1970.
No, I can't believe you're bringing that
well,
up.
I've got to. It's a part of his. It's a part of his career, isn't it?
Where there's a hit, there's a writ.
And it was. Well, it was. He was found guilty of this, and it was supposed to be a copy from "He's So Fine" from the Chiffons from 1963. How did that? I mean, did he feel that was an absolute travesty? What do you feel as a sort of an independent biographer about that episode?
Well, the three notes in "He's So Fine" and the three main notes in "My Sweet Lord" are really identical. But there is much more to the song "My Sweet Lord" than that. It's an anthem for universal love and brotherhood. Actually, before John Lennon wrote "Imagine," George wrote "My Sweet Lord." And he was very nervous about it. He even put out, he got his friend Billy Preston to do a soul version of it to see if anybody would try to sue on the basis of that, and they didn't. So it was a terrible shock, yes, and that lawsuit went on for years and years and was very, very upsetting and humiliating for George.
Well, one of my favourite songs, I know that. But next week, I think it's the 2nd of November, the last new Beatles song, Now and Then, will be released. I know they've used AI, guitar from George from 3 decades ago. How do you think he'd look upon that now?
Well, he really didn't like the fact of the anthology and the Beatles anthology in the 1990s. It actually did save his financial bacon at the time, because he owed huge amounts of money because of his film company, Handmade Films. But he really didn't like looking back, and he never really came to terms with what he'd gone through as a Beatle. So I think he would have probably been obstructive, as only George could be obstructive, about this one.
Well, loads of people I know have been running forward to it. And were they close, the Beatles, at the end of their life? Was George close to Paul? How did it all end up, this phenomena, this music phenomena?
They had been so close. I mean, close enough that when they were once in the back of their road manager's van in a snowstorm and the windshield broke, the only way they could keep warm was to drink a bottle of whiskey and lie on top of each other like penguins. And that they shared body heat. You couldn't get closer than that. But of course, in the later years, there were continuous. The Balkan Wars were nothing compared to the Beatle Wars. But in the end, John's death was a terrible shock and left sort of unfinished business, both for George and for Paul.
Just very quickly, if you can, Philip, why did you want to write a book about George Harrison in particular?
Well, I didn't for a long time because I rather accepted, the idea of him as being rather sort of crotchety and ungrateful. I had to write the life of John and Paul and also Eric Clapton to realise exactly the paradox of being George, which was often very uncomfortable. And also he was so contradictory about everything. One minute he would be railing against the material world, the next minute he's writing the first song complaining about income.
Philip Norman, thank you for joining us there. I know we could speak for a long time, but you know what? The break beckons. The George Harrison, The Reluctant Beatle, is out now. Coming up in the next hour, we've got your top stories from the week, plus royal sports and showbiz latest.
All that and much more right after this break.
Hello, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So it was a fairly unsettled end to the week last week and not much changing as we're going through this weekend. This big area of low pressure out to the west of the UK, bringing up various weather fronts from the southwest throughout the weekend. So to start Saturday, there's a fair bit of mist and fog around for some northern and eastern areas, and this will take its time to lift throughout the rest of this morning and into this afternoon. Showers as well for Northern Ireland and southern and western coasts of England and Wales, and some more persistent rain across eastern Scotland before we see further heavy rain and potentially some thunderstorms as well, pushing in towards southwest England into the latter part of this afternoon. This will then make its way northwards as we head through tonight, to be followed by further heavy showers and some quite strong blustery winds along southern coast as well as northern coast as we go into the early hours of Sunday. This rain will then end up across northern England and eastern parts of Scotland as we go into the second half of the weekend. So a fairly wet, windy and dull second half of the weekend here. Further south, some brighter spells as we go into Sunday, but still some heavier showers, particularly across southern and western coast, but feeling pretty pleasant in that sunshine though as we go into Sunday afternoon, with highs of around 13 to 15 degrees Celsius.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this?
Are you rethinking this policy?
Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Hello and welcome to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil. It's great to have you with us. Now, as the war in Gaza and Israel intensifies and people take to the streets in the United Kingdom, we're going to be speaking to a former Met officer to say, when can the police intervene? If shouting jihad, is that enough to arrest somebody? Waving a Hamas flag, is that enough to arrest somebody? We want to know.
And last night, Tottenham Hotspur went 5 points clear at the top of the Premier League, beating Crystal Palace 2-1. Who better to speak to about that and the Manchester derby this weekend than former Tottenham manager himself, Harry Redknapp.
and friend of the show too.
Absolutely.
And what's in a baby's name after a duke in Spain was told that name is way too long, shorten it down. And you've got things like Brooklyn, haven't you? Posh and Bex had that. Strange names, quirky names. So what is it? We're going to speak to a psychologist who said, is it about the child or is it about the parents trying to influence what the child's going to be when they grow up?
And in the week when Harry and Meghan were lampooned by the creators of Family Guy in America as being grifters, we're going to be speaking to former royal correspondent from The Sun, Charles Ray, to discuss all things royal. And as always, we want to hear your views on all of these things. Please email us, join in the conversation, gbviews@gbnews.com. But before all of that, here's the news headlines with Tatiana.
Phil, thank you very much. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. This is the latest. Israel says its troops are in the field, suggesting that a long-awaited ground offensive in Gaza may be in its early stages. A military spokesman also said that aid will be allowed into the besieged area, raising hopes of a pause in fighting. The World Health Organization says it's lost contact with all its staff working in Gaza. The enclave's facing a near-total communications blackout, with internet and mobile phone services cut off. Large crowds are expected in London and other cities this afternoon as people gather to demand a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. Around 100,000 people are expected in the capital, with other rallies taking place elsewhere, including in Manchester, Glasgow and Birmingham. The Metropolitan Police is advising caution, warning that officers will intervene if protesters are deemed to be supporting terrorism. Meanwhile, the United Nations has overwhelmingly adopted a resolution calling for a humanitarian truce in Gaza. The resolution, drafted by Arab states, condemns all violence, terror and indiscriminate attacks against Palestinian and Israeli civilians. The resolution is not binding but could put diplomatic pressure on Israel to de-escalate the conflict. The UK's Foreign Secretary James Cleverly says there's no reason to believe Hamas would observe any ceasefire, as he reiterated the UK's support for Israel.
We have been focused throughout on ensuring the safety, where possible, of the British hostages and the British nationals in Gaza. We've also been speaking to try and secure their release, but also to have the humanitarian aid get into Gaza. We will continue to pursue those aims, and the conversations that I've had with the Israeli government, we have reiterated our support for their right to defend themselves, but also that they do so in accordance with international law.
The search for a man believed to have carried out a mass shooting in the US state of Maine has ended after the suspect was found dead. Army reservist Robert Card is believed to have killed 18 people and wounded another 13 in a shooting rampage. His body was discovered in a woodland area near the town of Lisbon Falls. Police believe he suffered a gunshot wound that was likely self-inflicted. The shooting began at a bowling alley earlier in the week. It was followed by reports of another shooting at a nearby restaurant. It's the deadliest mass shooting in the state's history. There's no relief in sight to a record backlog of Crown Court trials, according to the Director of Public Prosecutions. Max Hill KC, who's stepping down this month, says a shortage of barristers and judges is clubbing up the system. He says cases are at an all-time high, and while the judiciary has been expanded slightly, it's not been enough to alleviate the pressure. Latest figures show more than 65,000 cases are still awaiting trial. A proposal to close rail ticket offices has resulted in the biggest ever response to a public consultation. The RMT union says around 750,000 passengers have had their say ahead of an expected announcement on the future of ticket offices at train stations. The union's head, Mick Lynch, is warning the government against the closures, saying that 98% of respondents are opposed to the controversial plan. Around £7 million of taxpayers' money has been spent on renovations at the Speaker's house. Sir Lindsay Hoyle took office in 2019. More than £1 million. Since then, a year has been spent on the property, including on staterooms and offices. The figures, which were revealed in a Freedom of Information request, don't say how much was spent on furnishings compared to structural improvements. However, the Telegraph understands that some of the money has been spent on silverware. And it's looking to be a dark and gloomy Halloween weekend with weather warnings in place for parts of England and Scotland. A yellow warning covers Brighton, Portsmouth, Canterbury and London, with the possibility of heavy rain. The Met Office says there's a small chance of power cuts as well as flooding and public transport delays. A yellow warning remains in place in Scotland as well, with some rail services still suspended following damage caused by Storm Babbitt. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying Play GB News. Now it's back to Esther and Philip.
Thanks, Tatiana. Now, your views have been coming in thick and fast on everything we've been speaking about this morning, particularly the Israel-Gaza situation and the protests here in the UK.
Yeah, Nada says about the protests, our towns and cities cannot be taken over in this way constantly. We also have a right to go about our business and live our lives. We're being prevented from going to parts of the towns where the protests are taking place. Enough. The streets are for everybody, not just for people who want to protest.
Lots of people with those views coming in there. And pregnant women in prison, that was our big debate today. Kevin says, if you do the crime, you do the time. He said, but I think the area that would be not so clear-cut is if someone who has a life-limiting illness is sent to prison. There isn't enough prisons, build more, and then you can have ones for the inmates with full maternity facilities.
There's loads of views coming in about this, and I've been trying to find somebody who doesn't think that pregnant women should be sent to prison, and I've got to say, I can't find one. Sandra says there's a very simple way not to go to prison if you're pregnant. Don't commit crime. Patricia says, sorry, if you do the crime, do the time, pregnant or not. Max says, here we go again. Women want equality, except when it isn't to their advantage. They're all pretty much of a similar ilk. If you think being pregnant should stop you from being sent to prison, let us know, because
nobody else does.
We're not getting many of those views at the moment.
Right, thousands of pro-Palestine protesters will take to the streets of Britain today as calls for a ceasefire intensify.
New statistics show a shocking 408 anti-Semitic attacks in the last week alone, along with 174 Islamophobic attacks.
The march comes following harsh criticism of the Metropolitan Police's handling of the last Palestine Solidarity March, with shouts of jihad being caught on camera with seemingly no repercussions from the authorities.
So what do the police need to do to ensure the safety of all communities and avoid a repeat of previous shortcomings?
Joining us now is the former Metropolitan Police Superintendent Lee Roy Logan. Good to have you with us. Like I say, a lot of our viewers actually really don't think these protests should be going on at all. They're saying, you know what, we can't get about our day-to-day business. They're becoming disruptive. They're overtaking things we want to do. Why are the protests going ahead with such regularity?
Well, it's enshrined in common law and British law that anyone is allowed to have peaceful protest. So that's why that can't be stopped unless there's a specific risk to the public or to the national interest that they don't take place. So in all honesty, it's inevitable that people want to protest if they don't agree with things. And if they're in collective numbers to occupy the streets peacefully, then they're allowed to do so.
Leroy, where would you draw the line in terms of what constitutes a peaceful protest? Obviously the law's in place, but obviously the police have to exercise some judgment. Where do you think the line should be drawn in terms of, chants of from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, which has particular connotations for the Jewish community, people carrying a placard saying, I support Hamas, or people calling for a jihad? Where do you think the line should be drawn? The police should start to intervene?
Well, there is clear legal framework. Whether it's adequate or not at the moment, that's yet to be decided, because I know the Commissioner wrote a report to the Home Secretary to be debated by Parliament around the legal loopholes in current legislation, which I might add peaceful protesting is overseen by some of the most draconian legal frameworks in Western Europe. So there's that piece. And then as long as you don't have people advocating, promoting a prescribed organization like Hamas, because Palestine is not a prescribed organization. It's a geographical area. And as long as you're not wearing clothing to promote a prescribed organization under the Counterterrorism Act, then there is nothing to stop people from saying Free Palestine or anything of that nature.
Leroy, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to join us this morning. We really appreciate your expertise and insight into how the police should manage these protests.
Tricky situation. Now to look through the top stories of today, we're delighted to be joined by TV and radio presenter Mike Parry and the CEO of Downtown in Business, Frank McKenna. To be fair, this hour we'll start with you, Frank.
Thank you very much. Well, we're talking about should pregnant women go to prison? And a story that caught my eye earlier this week was a TikTok prankster, Mizzy, who I'd not heard of previously, to be honest.
It's your age. Your age.
Absolutely. He's been banned from using social media after being convicted of posting videos without consent. He's 19-year-old. He's a father. And the judge has told him that he can expect a prison sentence because apparently he's been warned not to post videos of people who don't give their consent. My initial reaction was, stupid lad, because he's gone out after the initial court hearing, done exactly the same thing, deserves to go to prison. And then when I reflected on it, I thought, well, you know, if you go back, you mentioned age, you know, if you go back to my day, Esther, I won't say yours, but we used to have these things that Michael remember called shock jocks, and used to have people phoning with pranks, and people didn't know they were going to be pranked, and sometimes they upset people. And I don't remember any of those DJs going to court. But the other thing I thought was, given the fact that we're now saying to judges, don't send rapists to prison, shouldn't we be finding a better way of utilising this guy's talent, sending him into schools, colleges, doing community service, rather than putting him into prison? So I honestly, I'm a bit torn because I think he's been stupid.
I mean, he has been...
He's flouted the law,
and
but
he has been,
is there a better way of punishing him?
And Missy, if you don't know me, he has done it a lot. What he has been doing has actually been disturbing, causing mayhem, causing upset with his film. It's above and beyond. I know what you mean, though. TV pranks are all that, but it's, and beyond. There is something wrong there. Phil?
But I just thought, I mean, what do you think about this, Mike? Because, I mean, I suppose if it's all very well saying people like this shouldn't go to prison, but if they've been given community sentences in the past and they still keep offending, at some point you've got to say, well, there's got to be another sanction.
Do you know what? What it illustrates to me is that people certainly of my age, maybe of Frank's age and all our ages, the difficulty we're having in adjusting to the new world and how we respond to the new world. I mean...
If people don't give a damn, they don't give a damn, do they? This guy hasn't.
Exactly, but what I'm saying is he's of a generation now where, A, authority doesn't always have to be obeyed, B, I'm a free-thinking individual, I know more about people who make the laws now. TikTok, for instance, is massive. And in about 3 years' time, I'm predicting somebody will find something else, which will be massive. You know, there was Twitter, now there's TikTok. I work for another broadcaster, and they do ask permission to make a TikTok video of a part of the broadcast I'm on, and can it go out? And I have to sign a form, a release form, to go out. So it's you know, it's all...
But going back to your point about discipline and a lack of regard for authority, I totally agree with you, because I think that is a problem. If you don't actually want to agree with the law, or if you don't actually want to serve a sentence, if you want to be, I don't know, disruptive, then I'm afraid this is the world we're moving into. I would send them to prison, but I think we are going to have a serious thought on what we do when people disregard prison.
What's your story,
sentencing.
Yeah, but it's not, sorry, just to finish, it's not just young people. When you get middle-aged marchers who are blocking the King's Highway, they should be arrested, but they don't. They say,
we did that last week, didn't we?
I want to block the highway. I'll block the highway.
Protesters.
Right, now I want to tell you this story in the Times. The Platonic co-parents buddying up to raise babies, right? And I like this story because I've been single all my life, OK? And I'm now... Yeah, I know. Who was surprised?
Did I laugh inappropriately? I knew I did the wrong thing.
Yeah. I could see that coming, Esther. I could see that gasp of, thank God he's out of my age range, you know what I mean? And so I've never got married and have children. And I've met women, increasingly, you will find that women are getting to the age of 40 or 41 or 42 who've not forged relationships like we used to. They've tried to do it on a laptop, you know what I mean? What do they call it? Dating online and all that kind of stuff. It hasn't worked out. I know women who this has happened to and who suddenly talk about the body clock, OK, and it going out there, who I know one woman who wanted to come to a relationship with a bloke who worked in the same place as she did. He'd got divorced, and the agreement was to have a child, and they jointly parented it, but they didn't live together. They weren't getting married. They would each enjoy the benefits of parenthood.
Could that work better? Frank, turning to you.
And if you don't mind me...
co-parenting in my time.
I was going to say, if you don't mind me saying, Frank's a father of 7
Yeah,
with different women.
So, well, let's not go there.
Well, I know 2 wives.
Stand up and take a bow, Frank. I should sit down and have a rest.
Well, we go back to your earlier story, Phil. Obviously,
exactly.
Didn't affect me.
No.
But I have to say that, listen, it's the modern age, I think, again, if we look at the way in which people are having to go into, or deciding to go into careers long term.
Yeah.
Women particularly deciding that actually career comes first on occasion. They then may get to a certain age and, as Mike says, not necessarily want to settle down with a partner, but do want a child. So it's not surprising to me whether or not it's something that I would necessarily buy into, but as I say, given my past record, I've done some co-parenting anyway.
No, but if you've got married, you've got divorced, and you've got... lots of people have. Could it have been better for maybe the child to have had a friendship that lasts longer? I just want to point out that Mandelson is married at 70
years of age,
so later in life. We did that, Phil. Not as old, obviously, as 70, but we were slightly later in life. You'd done it once before. I was the one later. Anyway, just saying, Mike, it can happen at any age. 70. Mandelson, don't you worry.
If there's anybody out there, you know where I am. Esther, you're right. I say the search for the first Mrs. Parry is still on. Don't worry about it.
Should be a very lucky lady.
Absolutely.
Now, here we go. Here's my second sex story of the day. But
wow, it's a bit of an obsession here, I think, Phil.
Yes. All talk.
Unlike Frank, obviously. Page 31 of The Sun here. A charity shop, I think this is hilarious, this. A charity shop has issued a plea to customers after it received unwanted, raunchy donations of used and unused sex toys. So Bernardo's, this is a Bernardo's charity shop in Swansea. So they put out a thing saying they're looking for toys. Obviously as a children's charity. And lots of people had been sending in sex toys, which they've actually had to put a thing out to say, you know, we're very appreciative of donations, but we are a children's charity and we want toys, but not sex toys.
Well, and most importantly, not second-hand sex toys.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We don't want to go there, do we?
Doesn't get the Dettol out.
Doesn't terribly surprise me.
They know, but I wonder whether if they were actually looking for business in terms of getting those things donated, they should be talking to the people who were involved in the first story that Phil mentioned, because surely it's their partners that may have some of those toys.
Well, maybe.
It could be.
If you missed the first story, get it on play. You might not know what the first... That was an hour ago.
But
before the watershed, so we've got to be careful.
Without being unkind to anybody in Wales, does it surprise you this is in Swansea?
Mike, you're right on the edge there.
No.
Our Welsh viewers would have approved.
Hey, listen, don't worry. I love Wales, the Principality of Wales. I was born on the border in Chester, OK? Some of my best friends are Welsh. Don't worry about that. I'm just saying that you are
very... not going to be Welsh, I think we can safely say.
You are a very lively community, that's all I can say.
I just wonder what you thought about this, actually. Page 7 of The Star. Get stuffed. Millennials ditch Christmas dinner gravy for ketchup, mayo, or even olive oil. Apparently, Gen Zers, they don't want gravy anymore on their dinner. They want olive oil and chilli sauce.
You can't believe it. Or even ketchup.
And ketchup, and apparently gravy is least popular in London and most popular in Newcastle.
Whilst, first of all, I pulled a face, I then thought, well, actually, I have mustards and I have cranberry sauce. So,
No, but they're accepted. They're accepted culinary additions.
But why should that be accepted and the other one shouldn't?
It's
olive
the way in
oil
which
with your
people...
Christmas dinner.
I wouldn't fancy olive oil, but I know, you know...
Did you have a serious story, Frank?
Yeah, but just to give my daughter Grace a shout-out, because she loves ketchup with gravy. So
no, but not on Christmas Day.
So a serious, probably, a serious story. So let's talk about electric vehicles for a second, because this is something I've explored in terms of changing from a diesel vehicle to an electric car. And a couple of my mates have got electric vehicles, and they've been telling me the nightmare that they've had in terms of trying to find chargers. But then I started to explore the possibility, because as a business owner, you get quite a generous tax break if you buy an electric car. Until you
do at the moment.
What the insurance company's going to charge.
That's right, £1,000 minimum.
And so, you know, I would simply say to the politicians who are looking at our net zero targets, fully supportive of that, but in terms of EVs, electric vehicles, if you want to get serious, you really do have to start to get your infrastructure right and to start to say to the motor companies, you're going to have to start to pay your prices
the big
down.
debate in the Times today, should there be more support for electric cars? Some people are saying the government should support them more. Somebody else saying, absolutely, they
car
should.
companies should do it.
Yeah, it's going backwards. We're all from the north, OK? I'll tell you a fact. There are more electric chargers in the boroughs of Islington and Westminster than there are in Nottingham, Bradford, Sheffield and Liverpool put together.
Correct.
Mike,
put together,
Frank,
OK?
Thank you very much. Ending on that high note
I've
there.
emerged unscathed. Three Liverpudlians next to me. I've got away with it.
Yeah, we'll mug him after the show, don't you worry. We'll gang up them. Coming up, though, how long is too long for a baby's name? A Spanish duke gave his child a staggering 15 names. Is that a bit too much?
Plus, legendary former football manager Harry Redknapp joins us to look at Tottenham Hotspur's sensational win last night, putting them 5 points clear at the top of the Premier League. Sorry, you Liverpool and Everton fans here.
Always definitely going to be sorted out at the end of the show. All that in just a few moments.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Welcome back. The time now is 11:25 and we'll be with you right through until midday. Now, a Spanish duke has hit a sticky wicket after authorities told him he must shorten his baby daughter's staggering 15-part name in order to legally register. GB News producer Rebecca Nunes, who hails from the glorious land of España, kindly agreed to pronounce the name for us.
Sofía Fernanda Dolores Cayetana Teresa Ángela de la Cruz Micaela del Santísimo Sacramento del Perpetuo Socorro de la Santísima Trinidad y de todos los santos.
Easy for her to say.
And that's why we got her to say it rather than us.
Let's hope they're never going to have to sign autographs. Fernando Fitzjames Stewart, the 17th Duke of Huescar, wanted, I think I pronounced that wrong as well, I'm going to get told off by Rebecca, wanted to name his daughter, but has been told by authorities that a child's given name must not exceed more than 1 compound name and 2 simple ones.
So should there be restrictions on what parents name their children, or should the state stay out of such decisions? And why would you want to give your child such a long name? Well, to discuss this, we're joined by relationship psychologist and social commentator Dr. Pam Spur. So we've had those names like Apple, and we've had names like Brooklyn, lots of strange, quirky names, that incredibly long name there. But what does it say about the parents that they want to inflict such names on their children?
Well, as a parent, you give a powerful message about what your kind of brand, your team is when you name your child. And remember, the aristocrats have a sort of a whole different set of rules than we do. They always sort of honor different branches of their aristocratic family by having multiple middle names. Look at our royal family. They all have at least 4 middle names. But when it comes to the rest of us, a fifth of us come to regret the name we've chosen. A big survey of 1,500 parents found that mainly it was because people couldn't pronounce or couldn't spell it correctly, the name we'd chosen, or suddenly the name became popular, or because we felt pressured by our partners. So that's, 20% of us regret those choices. And also, some people said they regretted choosing something unusual because their child got teased. So we always need to be mindful when you're trying to give that team, that brand message through your baby, make sure the baby isn't going to suffer.
Are you much more likely to be teased, bullied at school, or if you've got an unusual name? And are you much more likely to be famous if you've got an unusual name, Pam?
Well, it goes both ways, Philip. You're absolutely right. One big piece of research found that classic names, like, say, Eleanor, over the name Jade, actually people kind of respected those people more. They actually did better academically. Then if you have an unusual name, depending on what it's like, if it's something like Apple, which is kind of cute, it's quirky and cute, it doesn't really affect you. But when you have those really standout names like, say, Bluebird, people tend to think, oh, you know, what were your parents thinking? And then they reflect that onto the baby, which is really unfair. But we do advertise whether we're kind of old-fashioned, whether we're trendy, we're quirky, or like me, I went for kind of old-school biblical names with my children. So, you know, you do advertise something about yourself, and I decided to go old school, and actually the names, you know, they've never been teased for their names.
Do you like your name, Pam?
No, my parents, all of us kids received either English or Scottish names, and because my parents were great Anglophiles, so Pamela, such an English name, I don't like it. It sounds very old-fashioned, I think.
Pam Spur, we love it. We love you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Esther's not that common, is it?
No, and for a little while, I always thought, gosh, it's an old name for a little girl. But then I grew to love it. When I got told what it meant, it means Persian star. So then I warmed towards it. Yeah. And now I love it.
Anyway, in just a moment, we've got your top stories of the week, plus your royal sports and showbiz latest, including footballing legend Harry Redknapp.
But first, the news with Tatiana.
Esther, thank you very much and good morning. It's 11:30. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. Israel says its troops are in the field, suggesting that a long-awaited ground offensive in Gaza may be in its early stages. A military spokesman also said that aid will be allowed into the besieged area, raising hopes of a pause in fighting. The World Health Organization says it's lost contact with all its staff working in Gaza. The enclave's facing a near-total communications blackout, with internet and mobile phone services cut off. Large crowds are expected in London and other cities this afternoon as people gather to demand a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. These pictures are coming to us live from the Cenotaph in London, where around 100,000 people are expected to gather shortly. Other rallies are taking place elsewhere in the country, including Manchester, Glasgow and in Birmingham. The Metropolitan Police warns that officers will intervene if protesters are deemed to be supporting terrorism. The search for a man believed to have carried out a mass shooting in the US state of Maine has ended after the suspect was found dead. Army reservist Robert Card is believed to have killed 18 people and wounded another 13 in a shooting rampage. His body was discovered in a woodland area near the town of Lisbon Falls. Police believe he suffered a gunshot wound that was likely self-inflicted. It's the deadliest outbreak of gun violence in the state's history. And there's no relief in sight to a record backlog of Crown Court trials. That's according to the Director of Public Prosecutions. Max Hill KC, who's stepping down this month, says a shortage of barristers and judges is clogging up the system. He says cases are at an all-time high, and while the judiciary has been expanded slightly, it's not enough to alleviate the pressure. Latest figures show more than 65,000 cases are still awaiting trial. For more on all of those stories, you can visit our website, gbnews.com.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
5 points clear at the top of the table. I mean, what is it that the new manager, Ange Postecoglou's done to get
that you couldn't do?
They've lost Harry Kane. They've lost Harry Kane, and the 5 points clear. How's he done it?
Lucky Harry Kane wasn't still there. There'd be about 10 points clear. But they've recruited well, actually. I mean, Maddison, as everybody keeps saying, was a great signing for Tottenham. They brought in a couple of fullbacks who have done great. The centre half, the Dutch boys come in, have been excellent. So they look very well balanced as a team, and they're getting players back to fitness. So yeah, and I like the manager. There's nothing. He tells it as it is. He's not trying to be clever and come out and baffle everybody and make out he's a genius, a coaching genius, and coming out with all this terminology that no one can understand, like some of the managers and coaches do now. He tells it straight. He talks the language of the people and the supporters, and they love him. He looks a great guy.
I guess the big question, Harry, is can they keep it going?
I think they can keep. Listen, I don't see them winning the league. I think the league, I see them finishing the top four. I'd love to see them keep going, but if you ask me honestly, I think the winners will come from Man City, Liverpool, Arsenal of the league this year. I know it's a Liverpool. I know that's pleased you, Liverpool fan, but I think Liverpool will be bang there this year. But I think Tottenham. I think they'll finish in the top four. I think they'll probably finish fourth.
Now, I want to ask you about something, Harry, as our superstar manager. I was reading in the paper over the last week about a manager of Havant and Waterlooville Football Club, where apparently the players are paid about £300 to £400 a week. They've got a new manager, Steve King, and he's brought in this new system of fining people. So he fines people 50 quid if they fail to stop in the bar after a match until at least 5:45 p.m. He fines them 25 quid for not bringing in cakes when it's their turn, or if they bring in a bad selection of cakes. He has a £100 fine for being late on match days and a £150 fine for talking back to the boss. So, I mean, is this the kind of regime that you had, Harry, or what would you say to Steve King at Havant and Waterlooville about this system he's got?
Well, they'll end up with no wages. The players that I managed would have been skinned by the end of the week. I mean, no, I can't see that. Not talking back to the manager. Well, I'd have had plenty of fines here. I did use, you know, most of them have got something to say for themselves, most of the players, so as we all did when we played. So, no, I don't see that. I think that's a difficult one. But let's hope most important that they win some games, get some bonus, and they can afford to pay the fines.
The best thing...
I'm going to follow them with interest now, having at Waterlooville. They're on my list of teams to follow.
I had a feeling that you might have been trying to keep your players out of the bar after the matches rather than encouraging them to stay in the bar.
Absolutely. I'm being truthful. I banned, when I was at West Ham, we had a players' bar there for years, and when I took over, it was getting abused. I think they were coming out there after a game on a Saturday. It finished at 10 to 5. I don't know what time. I was back home in Bournemouth by the time they were coming out, I think. So I did actually stop them drinking in there, only soft drinks. But I did find later that they actually had the barman on their side, and when they was asking for Coca-Cola, they were actually getting vodka and Coke or whatever, Bacardi and Coke, and you know they were he was still mixing the drinks under the bar for the players.
So, if you were ever going to bring in a ban or a fine, what would it be?
Oh my God, oh, you've got me. What would it be? I don't know. There's so many you can fine people for, but I didn't like fining players. I'll be truthful. It's their wages. They've got families. The last resort for me was to fine them. That was my last resort. They'd have to really step out of line badly, you know.
Who was the naughtiest? Who was the naughtiest player that you had, Harry, that you managed? Who was that? Who was the one that used to cause you the most problems?
Oh, I've had loads of them. Paolo Di Canio was a fantastic player and a genius, but you know, no, he didn't cause me really. I had a boy called Johnny Moncur. He was a great character, John, and he would get up to all kinds of mischief. So, yeah, there was a load of them. And he had a little group at that time. They were fantastic lads to work with and manage, but they were quite lively. And I actually had some lads at Bournemouth back in the early days, and I remember one of them. It was his stag night, and they stripped him naked on Boston Pier, and he lived in Bournemouth, which was about a 25-minute, 30-minute walk, and he never had a stitch on. It was the middle of summer. Now, however, he didn't end up in the police station I don't know, but he played next week anyway. So, yeah, I've had some characters.
Harry, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this morning. You're a star. Thank you.
Good talking to you guys.
Cheers.
Great. Imagine that, having to walk all that way naked. Anyway, it's time now for your latest updates from the royal household. And we're delighted to say that we're joined by former royal correspondent at The Sun, Charles Ray. Fantastic to have you here. Now, look, Meghan and Harry, well, we saw that, wasn't it, the South Park cartoon, which had them taking the mickey out of them with their Privacy World Tour. But it seems like another cartoon is taking the mickey out of them now, Family Guy. Do the Americans not like them anymore?
I think it just goes to show... Good morning, anyway. It just goes to show that America is falling out of love with Harry and Meghan. And I have to say that what concerns me and what should concern Amazon bosses as well is that their trademark is being dragged through the mud now with people poking fun at Harry and Meghan. And you have to ask yourself, the Spotify ditched them with one of the Spotify guys calling them a swear word, grifters, which is an Americanism for con men. And you've now got to wonder how long it will be before Amazon decide that they no longer want them, because they're not producing. They're getting £80 million a year. I mean, I can do it for 60 million quite easily, but they're getting £80 million a year and haven't produced anything apart from those documentaries.
Let's take a little look at this cartoon, because basically it's saying that what you're earning, how are you making this money is basically what they're saying. Money for what? Let's see if we can show a little clip of that Family Guy cartoon.
Or millions from Netflix for no one knows what.
Put it with the rest of them.
Babe, time to do our daily $250,000 sponsored Instagram post for Del Taco.
I shouldn't have left the made-up nonsense.
Money from nobody knows what is what they're saying.
Or as we like to say in this country, Esther, money for old rope.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I suppose it's even worse when they start laughing at you. It's one thing being unpopular, but actually when they start laughing at you, I guess that's worse. Charles, I wanted to ask you about Steve Coogan, because he was saying that royal family fans are flag-waving idiots. What did you make of what he had to say?
Well, Steve Coogan is one of those people who's on my list of people that I do not take any notice of. He is a fantastic actor, and I saw him as Jimmy Savile, and I thought he was brilliant. But as someone who comments on other matters, including the royal family, I ignore him completely. His opinion, for me, doesn't count.
Well, it's hugely insulting for the vast majority of the country who actually all love the royals as well. It shows how out of step he is in his, no doubt, woke world. But going back to Meghan and Harry, you might know this. Are they still together? There's a lot of rumour, actually, that they're not. They're doing the odd event together, but actually they're no longer together, maybe living in separate places, getting new homes.
Well, there's, as you quite rightly said, there is an awful lot of rumours, and there has been rumours ever since this couple walked down the aisle that they weren't going to be staying together for much, for a long time or anything. There is no actual evidence to suggest that they are splitting up or that their marriage is in serious trouble. Yes, they've gone off on various things to do on their own, which I think is normal for most couples, and I'm sure you two, go your separate ways occasionally to do certain things, but you always come back home at night to be together. And I think it's exactly the same at the moment with Harry and Meghan. I think there's a lot of doom mongers out there would like to see this marriage wreck. I mean, all they've got's the pair of them. If that goes, then they've got nothing, either of them.
Charles Ray, as always, giving us the latest what's happening in the royal household. See you soon.
And you're right, Charles, we do try and stay apart as much as possible.
Yeah, and we don't always come back at the end of the night
exactly.
either.
It could be
we
anywhere.
go to different places. Could be Cheshire,
could be anywhere.
Could be Yorkshire, could be London.
3 glasses of wine and you could be anywhere, to be honest.
I'm always hoping. Anybody got a glass of wine?
Last week, the legendary pageant Miss Great Britain took place, in their own words, to showcase the beauty, talent and charisma of the finest contestants from across the nation.
Well, one of the categories up for grabs was Miss Great Britain Classic.
Miss Great Britain Classic. I think it was Ms.
Oh, well, go on then. Ms. Open to ladies over the age of 45.
Well, before the event, we interviewed one of the contestants, Gina Broadbent, and she joins us now again to tell us how she got on. So come on, Gina. Oh, look at that. How did you get on at the... I think we can see from what you're wearing how you got on.
I won, yeah, amazing.
Oh, you didn't say that suitably jubilant. I won, yeah. Maybe you can't with that crown on.
No, I don't want my crown to fall off. I still haven't got used to it, to be honest. I'm a bit gobsmacked by the whole thing, but very excited.
And how was it, though? There you are now crowned Ms. GB Classic there. Well, did you think you were going to win? Did you think, oh, I've seen the other contestants, I'm like head and shoulders above them? Was it difficult? Are you excited? What was it like?
So, I'm a big believer in positive mental attitude. So if you go into something thinking you're going to lose, you're more likely to lose. So I was trying to keep really positive all the way throughout, but there was some tough competition. And one person in particular that I was a little bit nervous about because they were extremely experienced and I was a novice. But anyway, it all worked out. So, yeah, managed to pull it out of the bag.
For it now, Gina, will we be seeing you going for other beauty pageants, or what will this lead to?
Well, I'm now contracted with the Miss Great Britain organisation for a year, so I'm not actually allowed to enter any other pageants in the next 12 months until I hand over my crown. But to be honest, for me, Miss Great Britain is the place that I wanted to be. I feel a real affinity with the work that they do, and I'm really excited to keep working with their nominated charities, which is Cancer Research UK and Alex's Wish, which is a charity hoping to cure Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And I've done lots of fundraising with them in the last 8 months anyway, so we've developed a really nice relationship. So the future for the next 12 months is working with my two sister queens, with Maddie and Larissa, who won the 2 other age categories, and just continuing to campaign on menopause and female confidence, working with my sponsor, Owning Your Menopause, and just getting out there in the community and just doing some really good stuff.
Gina, we're absolutely delighted you won, and we're delighted that you came and joined in to our show today to celebrate your victory. Well done, it's fantastic. And we hope you enjoy your year ahead as Ms. Great Britain Classic.
And she looks absolutely gorgeous, sparkling there. I'm really made up for her, because I know she was feeling slightly intimidated at the time. She came on our show. I think we helped her. I think it was coming on this show that guaranteed that success.
Well said. Anyway, it's that time of the week. We're delighted to have our very own sports guru, Aidan McGee, and showbiz journalist Hayley Palmer with us in the studio. Who wants to go first, guys? Hayley, come on, what's going on?
I should go first.
That ladies first.
Age before beauty, one of them.
Go on, Hayley.
So I want to talk about Britney because, as we know, her book is out at the moment, and this has been a long-awaited wait. Well, I've been waiting a long time anyway.
How much is a weight of is that? If it's a wait.
That's a long wait.
That's a long wait.
I really wanted it for Christmas, but the thing is, I just can't get my head around someone that's that famous has just got all the problems in the world. Like, I just find it incredible, because you just think these people are really happy, but as you can see, she really wasn't. And it kind of started 10 years after Hit Me Baby One More Time, because that was in 1998, and 2008 was when all the troubles began.
Was that a conservatorship?
Yeah, the dad had that, didn't he?
So this is a really honest book, is it? It's not sort of like...
she has put pen to paper and she has expressed her feelings. So I'm going to be buying it for you, Phil, for Christmas.
I can't wait.
And just because you now being a showbiz superstar on GB, you know, he could face the same crisis in a few years' time. Is that what you said? Fame, but it is.
A selection box would probably go down better, to be perfectly honest.
But to be fair, I mean, I remember watching her at the time, and she was the most photographed person.
Yeah.
Her photographs were worth tens of thousands of pounds, and she was literally followed everywhere, crowds everywhere, not a moment to herself. So I'm quite sure for a decade, if that happened to you for a decade, something would happen, wouldn't it, to help you know, on your...
Yeah, we just want to wish her happiness, because she has been through a lot, hasn't she? You're right, everyone knows it, young people, old people, we all know who Britney Spears is. She's one of the most famous people in the whole world, but just her troubles, it makes me so sad to read it.
Big sporting weekend as ever, Aidan. I mean, last night, Tottenham, who'd have thought after 10 games, Tottenham would be top of the Premier League?
Magnificent start, Phil, it has to be said. They had a new manager, Ange Postecoglou, who tested himself in places like Australia, in Japan, in Scotland, not exactly hotbeds of football in recent years, and yet he goes to Tottenham and he helps them move on from Harry Kane. We spoke for weeks and weeks and weeks and months about what they were going to do after Harry Kane. No one's talking about him now because Heung-min Son has stepped into the breach. James Maddison at the price of £40 million. It sounds a lot of money to the layperson, but it's not a big money in terms of football transfers. He's been fantastic. I was actually at Tottenham on Monday night and they were absolutely superb. And they've gone 5 points clear at the top of the table. What I would say, though, this time last year, as we were approaching the World Cup, Arsenal in a similar position had a great season before. They'd missed out on the top four. They were 5 points ahead in the Premier League. Once we got back into the new year, into the swing of things, they were reeled in by Manchester City. The bigger squad, the big money really took over, even though they took it right to the end. So Spurs have got a long, long way to go, but they made a magnificent start.
I'm interested in the Tyson-Fury match.
You like your boxing, don't you?
Do you?
I do. I've been brought up on it. My dad loves boxing. His dad, you know, granddad loved boxing, yeah.
It's not going to be much of a contest, I don't think. He's up against a UFC fighter, Francis Ngannou. It looks to be about 11 o'clock start tonight. It's going to be in Saudi Arabia, so there's a few quid involved as well. It's a sign that Tyson Fury wants to be more than just a boxer, I think. But it's a sideshow. He's risking a hell of a lot if he loses because Alexander Usyk is just down the line. He's number 2 in the world, I would say. But I don't think he's going to have any problems tonight. I really don't. But again, it shows that Tyson Fury's ambitions lie beyond just boxing, but I expect him to have no problems this evening.
And the Premier, Fear Premier.
Yes. Now, I think this is a good recommendation because it's that time of year where you're like, actually, I do want to go to the cinema, eat some popcorn.
I always like going to
Oh, do you?
I
like that in the winter. But yes, I mean, it's a shark film, and I thought that's not for me. I'm more sort of, you know, a girly, you know, romance.
Hayley took me to the cinema once.
Are you kidding me?
Really?
Once, didn't you?
Yeah.
That was good.
I got 2 in one night. My first one and the last one.
Anyway, back to the TV Premier. It's a really good... It actually had me on the edge of my seat the whole way through. And it's about a girl that goes out to see her boyfriend. She's an experienced sailor. She goes on out there, and let's just say there's trouble in paradise.
Don't ruin it for us.
I'm not going to ruin it for you, but let's just say I'm never going swimming again in the sea because the sharks and what I've
seen...
Does
she survive? Don't give the end away. Don't give
No, we go to cinema a lot. Esther gets a big box of Maltesers. They're gone before the trailers are finished.
Is that right?
I also love the trailers because I like to know what's coming on next.
Coming up you love the trailers because that's when you're eating all the Maltesers.
Well, this is out on Monday in all cinemas.
Obviously, it's the Manchester derby, Man City against Man United. Obviously, Bobby Charlton died recently, so that's certainly going to be a big occasion this weekend.
Well, it's a big occasion anyway. 3:30 kick-off tomorrow at Old Trafford. It's a chance for Manchester United to mourn the passing of the legendary Sir Bobby Charlton, but also a chance for Manchester City to say goodbye properly to Francis Lee, one of their own legends who died about 3 weeks ago. Pep Guardiola signed the book of condolences yesterday in Manchester. He also called on the fans of Manchester City to show complete respect towards Bobby Charlton. There was an incident last week in the Brighton game where a couple of 17-year-old fans, I believe, were censured and reprimanded for some vile chants about Bobby Charlton at half-time, which we don't want to see. But I don't think we'll see that tomorrow. In my experience of Manchester City and Manchester United, they're very respectful on these occasions.
And, of course, it's the Rugby World Cup final tonight. I was gutted, wasn't I, last week, Esther, when England... I couldn't believe England didn't get to the... I just can't believe it.
We were convinced they'd won.
Well, yeah, we were.
They were doing well, weren't they? Right up until the last moment.
So what do you think, all Blacks to win?
No, well, I think All Blacks would be fresher, but I just sometimes think that game smartness of South Africa, having had those big battles against Ireland, which, of course, they lost, and then, of course, last week again... Well, they had France and they had England last week. I think they probably deserve to win it, having had that tougher run to the final.
And who's just sneaked in the studio to join us? Dawn, fantastic.
Completely unexpected.
Yeah.
Did I just hear you
We want to know one of the highlights of the show, because you're on next.
Yes, I am indeed. But did you just say you're not glamorous and girly by any chance? Did I hear that right?
Oh, no, I said that I was.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, yeah. I was going to say...
You were going to say, I totally missed it.
Stating the obvious. Right, in any case...
We're literally right up time.
All the breaking news, obviously, what's happening here on the marches, what's happening in Gaza and Israel, and some Halloween fun.
That's it from us. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you to Hayley and Aidan and Dawn. Stay tuned. We'll be on next week at 10 o'clock, and stay tuned for Dawn Neeson next.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows...
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend.